What's up, mobile devs? Today we are going to build together this amazing ripple effect animation in React Native. And in order to do it, we are going to use the React Native GestureHandler package and the React Native Reanimated package. So from this perspective, this animation seems quite easy. In my opinion, the animation isn't easy at all. Actually, I found it quite challenging, and personally, I've learned a lot from it. So a few months ago, this specific animation actually inspires me to build my own React Native package. So I built my package that is called React Native Inkwell. In this package, you will find an Inkwell component. This Inkwell component is quite similar to the component that we are going to build today. And basically, the package isn't production ready, but if you enjoy this kind of animation and you want to learn more, you can check out the GitHub link that I will put in the video description. So before moving on to the next section, I really feel that I need to thank you all, because we have reached 1,000 subscribers. And to be honest, it is a quite unreal achievement for me. I remember the first day when I started the channel, and I wasn't expecting at all this kind of support from the community. So that said, we can finally move on to the next section, and we can finally get our hands dirty. So here, as usual, I've created a React Native project with Expo. In this project, I've already installed two different packages. So I've installed the React Native GestureHandler package and the React Native Reanimated package. So the GestureHandler package will help us to access the tap gestures on the main thread. And the React Native Reanimated package will help us to build actually the ripple effect itself. So Reanimated will help to handle all the animation stuff. So for now, let's just focus on the first square. So we just need to build a view. And let's specify here a style equal to styles.ripple. So of course we need to define the ripple style. So let's say width equal to 200, height equal to 200, and let's set a background color. So here it is. Let's add also some shadow. So an opacity equal to 1, an offset with a width equal to 0, height equal to 0, and a shadow radius equal to 20. So this configuration will just work for iOS. For Android, we need to set the elevation property. So let's update this color and let's reduce a little bit the shadow opacity. So I think 0.2 looks great. So at this point, we need to deal with a lot of animation logic, and usually what I like to do is to wrap all this logic inside a specific component. So in order to deal with this case, let's create a components folder, and let's create the ripple component. So here I'm using a TypeScript for the project, of course. So the ripple component will be a functional component. So let's define it as a React functional component, and it will have some props. So let's say ripple props, and let's specify here the properties. So of course, the ripple will have a style as the normal view. And the second property that we need to set on the ripple component is of course the onTap function. So let's say onTap. So let's bind these properties to the React functional component, and let's import the style and the onTap. So for the ripple, the ripple button, of course, we need to wrap some children. We don't need to specify the children properties on the ripple properties, because since we are using a functional component, the functional component already provides us the children prop. So here we can access the children property. So let's wrap the children, and let's assign here style. So finally, we just need to wrap to replace the view with the ripple. So here it is working since the ripple has its style property. So finally, let's just wrap a text as a children. So let's increase a little bit the font size. And let's center the text. So justify content equal to center. So finally, we can start actually to handle the tap gesture. So basically, this tutorial is divided into different parts. So this animation basically is divided into parts. The first one is the part where we need to access the tap gesture, to find a way to access the tap gesture. And the second one is the animation part. So first of all, in order to access the tap gesture, we need to use the TapGestureHandler. So let's wrap everything with a TapGestureHandler. So of course, the TapGestureHandler is a component imported from React Native GestureHandler. And in order to access the tap, we need to specify here the onGesture event property. So let's create a TapGesture event. And let's assign it to the useAnimatedGestureHandler hook. So this hook is provided by Reanimated. This hook is made for a lot of different use cases. So basically, you can use the useAnimatedGestureHandler hook in order to handle, for instance, the pinch gesture, the tap gesture, or the pan gesture. So since here we want to use the tap gesture, we need to specify here the TapGestureHandler gesture event. So let's assign the tap gesture to the onGesture property, and everything should look great. So basically, if you are not familiar with this useAnimatedGestureHandler, feel free, of course, to check out my previous videos on the pan, on the pinch, or on the tap gesture. So, by the way, it is just an hook that provides some different callbacks. Here we can access the onStart callback, the onActive callback, and the onEnd callback. So, of course, you can access a lot of different callbacks. This function right here will be we will use actually this function to handle the animation. So to see if the tap is handled correctly, let's just print tap. So of course it isn't working, and that's because we are when we use a gesture handler from React Native gesture handler, we always need to wrap to wrap an animated view. So let's wrap everything with an animated view, and I'm using animated from React Native Reanimated. So let's reload. So everything is working fine. So of course, in the onActive function, we don't want to log on tap. We want to call the onTap function. So let's write if onTap. Let's call onTap. So we need, of course, to define here the onTap function, and let's log the tap method here. So of course it will not work. And why it isn't working? It isn't working because the onTap function, so it isn't working because we are calling a JavaScript function from the onActive function. So usually this isn't, of course, an issue, but in this specific case, onActive isn't a regular JavaScript callback. It is a worklet. A worklet is a concept introduced from Reanimated 2, so from the package React Native Reanimated, and it is a JavaScript function that it is executed on the UI thread, so on the main thread of the application. The onTap function, otherwise, instead is just a regular JavaScript function. So here the issue is that we are calling a JavaScript function synchronously from the UI thread, so from a worklet. So in order to fix this issue, here we can see two different possible solutions. The first solution is that we converted the onTap function into a worklet, The second solution is to call the onTap function asynchronously by using the runOnJS function. So all the solutions are great, but I think that for this use case it's much more useful to run the onTap function asynchronously with the runOnJS function. So let's wrap the onTap with the runOnJS. And let's import runOnJS from Reanimated. So let's tap, and we can see that everything is working fine again. So at this point, we need to find a way to animate effectively the ripple. So the technique that I want to use is that I want to create a circle and on top of this square, and I want to animate the circle itself. So the circle will be animated. So let's use an animated view, and this one will be our circle. So let's specify here a style, but so the style will be animated. So let's specify a reanimated style with the useAnimatedStyle hook, and let's return a style object. So let's pass here the reanimated style. So here let's define a circle radius equal to 20 for now. The width will be equal to circle radius multiplied by 2, the height to circle radius multiplied by 2, the radius, the border radius will be equal to circle radius, and let's set a background color just to see something. So here it is. Let's use position absolute. So here it is. So basically what we want to do, we want to define a specific circle radius, and we will not animate the circle radius. We are going to animate the scale of this circle. So basically we are going to use transform, and we are going to animate the scale property. So let's say 0.1, 0.2, and so on and so forth. And we are going to animate the scale property from value 0 to value 1. So for now, let's set the circle radius equal to 200. Let's also, let's set an opacity of 0.2. And I believe there is a strange behavior here. So basically, I'm not expecting that. Let's actually... So I believe position absolute top 0. So basically, I believe here we need to pass the style. So everything is fine right now. So basically here we need to pass the style to the animated view and not to the view itself. So everything should working fine as before. So basically right now we have our circle, and the animation will be, so during the animation we are going to animate the scale. So here we can see how the animation will look. So of course we are going to fix the fact that the circle is going outside the bounds of the square, so outside the square. So for now, let's just set, for instance, a scale of 0.5, and let's try to understand that how to actually animate this circle, since we are not just going to animate the scale, but we are also going to translate the circle position. So basically the animation will have different starting point. So for instance, if we are clicking here, we want that the circle animation starts from here. Otherwise, if we are clicking on another side, we want that the center of the circle is completely displaced. So in order to do that, let's create two different shared values. So let's create a center X shared value with the initial value equal to 0, and a center Y shared value with a value equal to 0. So here we want to find the center X and the center Y of our circle. And in order to find this kind of properties, so in order to access these properties, we can use the tap event from the onStart callback. So here, the tap event, actually, let's see the properties of the tap event. So when we tap, we can see here that we have some different properties. So we have absolute X, absolute Y, and so on and so forth. So we care about the X and the Y position. So basically, this position right here are the coordinate that we are, where we are tapping. So here we want to set the center X dot value of our circle equal to the tap event dot X, and the center Y dot value equal to tap event dot Y. So here let's create translate X equal to center X dot value and translate Y equal to center Y dot value. And basically we just want to translate the Y and the X. So let's say translate X and translate Y. So if we are tapping here, so I know it seems that it isn't working at all, but let's actually scale the circle radius to value 20. So it isn't working at all as expected. So it wasn't expected, by the way. And the issue is that we are maybe, let's say, minus. So, okay, so basically, let's say scale equal to 1. Let's say circle radius equal to 20. It is quite strange. Let's say top equal to 0, left equal to 0. So, okay, so right now everything is almost working. There is also an issue, by the way, is that we need also to add inside the translation the circle radius amount. So just to see in practice what I'm talking about, we need to subtract the circle radius and the circle radius here in order to align perfectly the circle on the top. So here we can see that everything is working. So at this point, we need to animate the scale property. So in order to animate the scale property, let's create a shared value. So the initial value will be equal to 0. And when we start, the tap gesture, we need to animate the scale value. So I will use with timing, and I will specify a duration of 1 second. So let's bind the scale value here, and let's reload. So here, let's also increment the circle radius. So for now, I'm saying 200. We will find in a second how to fix this value. So here, it is working almost fine, but we need to reset every time the animation. So every time we need to set the scale value equal to value 0, and after we need to call the with timing function. So here we can see that it is almost working. So at this point, we need to find a way to evaluate the circle radius. So the circle radius must depend on the width and the height of the square. So basically, what do we want? We want that if we tap on the... so the worst case is that the user tap on one of the 4 corners. And in this case, we want that our ripple effect covers at least all the square. So in order to do that, we want that the radius, it is equal to the square diagonal. So we need the width and the height, and we can use the Pythagorean theorem in order to evaluate the square diagonal, therefore the circle radius. So for now we know what is the width and the height. So for now, just let's say width equal to 200 and height equal to 200. We are going to fix this in a while. And let's say that the circle radius should be equal to math square root width squared plus height squared. So basically we are just calculating this diagonal. So here we can see that everything is working fine. So when we tap here, that is the worst case, we are covering all the square. So at this point we need to find a different way to evaluate the width and the height. So basically we have multiple options. For instance, we can pass the width and the height as properties, but I think there is a much better option. So there is this magical function from Reanimated that help us to find the layout of a view and to evaluate the layout of the view on the main thread. So let's see in practice what I'm talking about. But basically the main idea is to evaluate the layout of the view, to find the width and the height, and to use this width and the height evaluated at runtime in order to calculate the circle radius. So let's see actually in practice what I'm talking about. First of all, we need to define an animated ref. So let's say useAnimatedRef, and it will be of type view. So useAnimatedRef is a specific hook from React Native Reanimated. So let's wrap everything here with a view, and let's assign as a ref our animated ref. So here in the onStart callback, we can execute the measure function from Reanimated. With the measure function, we can find the layout of the view, and we can find the layout on the view on the UI thread. So we can easily call the measure function from a worklet, since the measure under the hood is also a worklet. And we need to measure our view, so our animated ref. So let's actually print this layout, and let's see what kind of values we have. So here we have some properties. We are interested in the height and the width. And we can see that the height and the width is exactly equal to 200. So for instance, if here we change the height to 250, we can see that the measure function is working fine. So at this point, we need to store these properties inside two different shared values. So let's define the width, that is a shared value equal to 0, with initial value equal to 0, and the height. So here we can assign width.value equal to layout.width, and we can save the height.value equal to layout.height. So at this point, finally, we can access inside this circle radius, we can access this width.value and the height.value. So let's run. And we can see that the circle radius is always fine. So we are always covering the edge case. So let's return back to height equal to 200. So at this point, the animation is almost completed. So of course we need to fix this circle behavior. So we need to wrap the circle inside the square. So in order to do that, let's add here the overflow property equal to hidden. So the overflow property is fine, but here the main problem with the overflow property is that we cannot see anymore the shadows. So in order to fix it, let's specify here style equal to style, and we can see that everything is fine. So this was the first issue. The other issue is that we need to animate the opacity of the ripple effect. So basically, when we release the finger from the square, we want that slowly the opacity of the ripple returns back to value 0. So let's define here the ripple opacity as a shared value with initial value, let's say 1. So here, let's say ripple opacity dot value equal to 1. So we need to reset every time the ripple opacity value. And at the end of the animation, we need to set the ripple opacity value to value 0. So we want that the ripple opacity returns back to value 0. So of course we need to assign this opacity right here. So let's reload. So it is working fine. We need to update the background color. So let's say almost black with 20% opacity. And we can see that the ripple effect is working nicely. So here the animation is completed, but I have an additional tip for you. So basically the onEnd callback is fine, it looks great, but if for instance something goes wrong while tapping this square, the onEnd callback isn't executed. Instead, the onCancel callback get executed. So instead of the onEnd callback, you can use the onFinish callback. The onFinish callback is a kind of finally block in a try and catch block. So basically, if something goes wrong, whatever will happen, the onFinish callback will be executed at the end. So the ripple opacity will return back to value 0. So at this point, just for design purpose, let's add the border radius property right here. And we can see that everything is working fine. So I know it may seem obvious, but it isn't, because if you have ever used, for instance, the touchable native feedback component from React Native on Android, you probably know that there is a known issue with this ripple effect. So basically the ripple goes outside the radius. So with this component we have solved this issue, plus we have the ripple effect implemented on the iOS platform. So thanks a lot at this point for staying with me all that time. So if you like this kind of content, if you have appreciated the video, consider to subscribe to the channel. Or if you have any kind of suggestion, feel free to leave a comment.